Hello everyone, good morning. This is Dr. Miles. Today we're going to talk a little bit about artificial food coloring, or I should say just artificial coloring in general, because artificial coloring tends to be in more than just food. Sometimes it shows up in your skincare products, as well as your hair care products like shampoos. And so what was very interesting to me, I could see it in foods that had color, right? But when I saw dye in a shampoo that was white and the dye was like green, I was just like, really? I feel like it's just gone too far, where the industry has made very much, the marketing industry has made very much use of the fact that what appeals to our eyes we are more likely to buy. And I think this goes back to just nature, where in general, if we were out in the wild, or even when animals are out in the wild, if you see a bright red berry on a tree, then that's going to pique your interest and you're going to want to go see it, eat the fruit if it's not poisonous and all of that. However, it's important for us to be aware of these marketing tactics, and so we're not always just led by what we see versus what we observe, what we read, what we interpret, what we know. So I just want to talk about artificial dyes a little bit, what these things, they provide no nutritional value, by the way. If anything, they might cause different side effects, and because they are synthetic, I do look at them as a toxin. And you will see for some people that they can very much be that way. And the other thing to keep in mind is that even if something doesn't do anything to you, remember that eventually you may have kids, right? And the thing is that we have the capacity to pass along our toxins to our children, and then so on and so on and so on. And so even if nothing happens to you, how would it make you feel to know that if your child has some sort of condition later on in the future, that may have been because of toxins that you were accumulating, and that your dad and their dad and so on and so forth, going back generations, accumulated. We have to also start thinking in those terms. It's not to put blame, but to say, hey, this may be something to consider in terms of prevention, not only for yourself, but for the generations to come after you. So most artificial dyes are in fact derived from petroleum. So there you go already. This is not really coming from a plant per se. This is something that is refined. As I said before, it does not provide any nutritional value. They're mainly included to appeal to your eyes. So some common artificial dyes that you may have seen in the stores are FD&C red number 3, red number 40, yellow number 5, yellow number 6, blue number 1, blue number 2, green number 3. So some of the adverse effects that can come from these dyes are as follows. So red dye, you can have trouble sleeping, headaches, migraines, hyperactivity, reduced concentration. And if you look up adverse effects of artificial dyes, probably the most common one that you will see is hyperactivity in behavior. And this has been considered an issue for individuals with ADHD. So if you have any type of trouble focusing, or your attention span is extremely short, this may be something to consider removing from your diet. So my story, the reason that this particular topic is of interest to me is because I have always had to watch artificial dyes in my life. I was very allergic to red dye, particularly. I would break out in scratch. I'd have itchy eyes. It was very obvious that I could not have red dye. But in addition to that, anything that had significant food coloring, I tended to stay away from. So like Kool-Aid, for instance, I did not drink Kool-Aid because it was just way too much artificial dye within Kool-Aid. I remember that. I didn't like it at the time, of course, because everybody was drinking Kool-Aid back then. But yeah, it was just way too much in one bottle. So it didn't even matter what dye it was. It was just too concentrated. So now if I have something with red dye in it, I'll probably get very, very nauseous, not feel good for a few days. And so red dye is also a neurotoxin, so it can affect your brain as well. So yellow dye It can also cause, and some of these adverse effects you'll see are common to most of the dyes. So yellow dye can create hyperactivity, headaches and migraines, allergies, asthma, skin rashes, runny nose. At one point has been shown to create tumors in animals, mood swings, gastric upset, so your stomach would be upset, and hives. So yellow dye, another one that was very concentrated in yellow dye and I reacted to was Sunny D. So some of you may remember that orange-ish drink, orange juice type of drink, whatever. I could not have that, and one of the ingredients was yellow dye. In fact, any type of orange soda I did not do well with. I would start itching, scratching, things like that. So blue dye, they saw that at one point that could create refractory hypotension and metabolic acidosis. I have noticed some effects of like headaches with blue dye, too much of it. So, and here are a few foods that are naturally dye free. So you can kind of guess it in terms of, if you just buy from Whole Foods from scratch, not from Whole Foods the store, but I'm saying buy your foods from scratch, unprocessed, the more likely you can avoid artificial food coloring. So nuts and seeds that are unflavored, all fresh fruits and vegetables, and the key word is fresh here, right? Also frozen, you're more likely to get fruits and vegetables that don't have any type of coloring on them. But of course, if you get more into something like, a cherry compost for a cherry pie or something like that, you may in fact run into red dye that way. It's not always in like little fruit cups, but again, because it's packaged, you never know. So for instance, pickles is a common one that I see yellow dye in, right? And you're like, why are they putting yellow dye in my pickles? Because they're trying to appeal to your eyes. So one of the particular pickle brands that I like is Bubbles, Bubbles, because they don't do that. So whole grains from scratch like oats, rice, and quinoa. Legumes like black beans, chickpeas, lentils. Fresh unmarinated, chicken, pork, beef, fish, and of course eggs. So of course the more you buy from scratch, the less you'll be exposed to artificial dyes. So the other thing in terms of red dye with me is that, yes, I used to experience a lot of skin reactions, and I also had eczema and atopic dermatitis when I was younger. So particularly I can say from personal experience, if you have any type of skin issues or your child is struggling from any type of skin issues, do consider taking artificial dyes completely out of their diet and see how their skin changes. So as I mentioned before, it's not just in food, it can be in shampoos. And so the more that you go towards a more natural shampoo, one that's trying to keep out things like parabens and phthalates and just trying to be a little bit more on the natural side, the more that you will be able to avoid dyes randomly put in shampoos. Again, it's more about what the shampoo does for your hair, for your scalp, for your body, not as much about the fragrance one, which is a completely other topic. That some fragrances can be environmental toxins. We don't know what fragrance means, and so it's just fragrance, but where does that fragrance come from? But again, that's another conversation. But again, stop trying to always buy stuff that appeals to your eyes and look at, is this product good for me? So again, also with different cosmetics, anything that you buy that is packaged, always look at the ingredients, and so that it's not just about, oh, this came from this brand, oh, I love how it makes my lips look, or blah, 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 blah. It's also about how it makes you feel and what you're putting in your body. So a couple ways that you can do food coloring in a more alternative fashion with actual food is of the following. So for pink, you could use raspberries or strawberries. For red, you could use beets or tomatoes. Now that may sound a little off-putting, but beet food coloring is in a lot of different food items that are trying to appeal to the healthy market. Please excuse thing in the background. But that doesn't mean it's going to taste like beets. It's actually probably going to be a smaller amount, or it's a beet powder, so it's not going to have the same flavor as beets. So just keep that in mind with some of the things that I say. It doesn't mean that it's going to completely taste like that food. It's just about the coloring that it provides. So for orange, the color could be carrots, paprika, sweet potato. For yellow, you could use saffron, turmeric. For green, you could use matcha. So matcha is like the matcha green tea, or you can get matcha powder. Green, you could also use spinach. So again, spinach or spinach powder. For blue, you could use blueberries. Well, actually, that might be more of a purple-ish. And then I also saw one that said like red cabbage plus soda makes a blue color. I haven't tried that one, but especially for baking, you're already putting like baking soda in something, right? Purple, again, blueberries could be great for that, as well as purple sweet potato. And then brown, you could use coffee, tea, or cocoa, chocolate. For black, you could also use activated charcoal. And another one that I found was squid ink. So I haven't used that one. So one of the things that I saw when I was researching this was that the colors that you create through this, through these alternatives may not be as intense as artificial food coloring. That is okay. To an extent, the marketing industry has really appealed to our senses in such a way that's in overdrive. And so if you create something that's more natural, that's not as processed, and it doesn't look the same intensity of color, don't worry about that. Just look, this is better for my body, better for the environment, so on and so forth. So, again, that's something that has made a huge difference in my life in terms of staying away from artificial food coloring, particularly red dye. That one is, I would say, probably out of all of them, that would be the one I'd say definitely stay away from. But again, that's from my personal experience and just from some of the things that I've seen come from that. So my name is Dr. Devin Miles. I provide telehealth consultations for prevention, gastrointestinal disorders, and kidney disease. And you can schedule a telehealth appointment at drdevinmiles.com. All right, guys, you have a great day. Take care.